We are back for another reaction video. We are reacting to Rachel Wilson. Actually, no. We are reacting to Stephen Crowder reacting to Rachel Wilson on the Joe Rogan Experience. Rachel Wilson is staunchly anti-feminist. She believes that feminism is a cancer and a plague, a scourge on society, and funnily enough, that when feminism was first introduced and suffrage, things like this, the average woman on the street apparently didn't want to vote. Like, most women didn't want the vote. According to Rachel Wilson, only 4% of women actively wanted to vote back then. So yeah, we're going to react to this. Let's go.
She's respected as the greatest feminist intellectual of the 20th century, and she was super influential. And in a 1970s interview with Betty Friedan, she said, "I don't believe that society should give women the opportunity or the choice to stay home and be mothers, because if we do, they're all going to pick that."
Not just third wave feminism, all feminism may have been not just a mistake, but a very evilly influenced movement.
This is what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. All right, let's go. Let's go.
And it's antithetical to all forms of true Christianity. Look, full disclosure, friends of the show, have become friends with them recently, having had them on the show. Yeah. And you're probably familiar with Andrew Wilson. Rachel Wilson is incredibly well read on the history of feminism. And she just appeared on the Joe Rogan show last night. And you could tell that Joe Rogan was really sitting, and he was just captivated because he was hearing some things that he had never really heard before. She was expounding on some of the things that were discussed in her book, which, by the way, I highly recommend. It's Occult Feminism: The Secret History of Women's Liberation. I highly recommend it. It's a very short read. You can do the audiobook, but it's worth it. It seems like one of those things that's clickbait, but it's not.
Right.
She sources it meticulously. So she was on Joe Rogan's show. And I will tell you this, I had, back in the day, there was a lady named Karen Strawn. You can go back and see some interviews with her, maybe in 2014. She really not only influenced me, but informed me on women's suffrage, on women getting the right to vote, and why it was a scam from the get-go. And I remember, let me ask you this, do you guys ever have those numbers, stats, historical facts that you hear, you verify that they're true, but they're so difficult to believe because of how you've been conditioned that you have to consistently go back to them? I get that all the time. I used to get that with Donald Trump, closing down the border, like 95% reductions in border crossings. I'm like, there's no way that's possible. There's no way that could happen in a year. I know it to be true, but it's hard. That's why you can't always trust your gut. Same thing happened with me, I think, in 2014 when I learned that the overwhelming majority of women did not want the vote. It was hugely unpopular, which brings us to the first clip of Rachel Wilson on Joe Rogan's show.
I would think, okay, well, I think women should have the right to vote. They're human beings. They live here. There's laws that are being...
Women really didn't want to be involved in politics. They let them vote on whether they wanted the vote. The biggest referendum was in Massachusetts. So they let women vote on whether they wanted the vote in a referendum. Of the women that showed up, not a lot of them showed up. It was a fairly smallish number, but of the thousands that showed up to vote, only 4% wanted suffrage on the ballot.
That's crazy.
Only 4%. So guess what Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony did after that? All the pro-suffrage leaders, they banned women from voting on whether they wanted to vote.
Oh my God.
Isn't that crazy?
So here's what's wild about this. In all the times I've heard about feminism, right? The story I've been told is that women historically have been held down by men, brutalized, captivated, enslaved, all of this kind of stuff. Then at some point, right? Some point towards the end of the 18th century or the beginning of the 19th century, collectively they got together and they were like, no, we don't actually want this. We want all of the rights and the privileges that men have. And they got together and they fought for it. That's what I've been told. That's what I believed, etc. According to this woman, that's not the case. Women were good. Women were happy. Women were like, nah, we got a good deal because men are protecting us from all of the evils in the world. We don't have to go out and work. We don't have to bend nature to our will in order to forge the modern world. We don't have to do any of that. We don't have to take part in politics and all that stuff. But we have a very privileged position we have power because they respect us and they want us because we're women, we've got a good thing going. But then you got a group of women who are like, no, we need to be able to do all the things that men do. And most women didn't want it at all. They're like, nah, go away. Like, I don't want to do any of this stuff. I think that's nuts. But you know what? I feel like there could be some truth to it as well, because, I mean, look, no expert whatsoever, right? But number one, how many people really enjoy their jobs? Like, really? Most people hate their jobs. Hate. With a good passion. The only reason we do it is because we feel like we have to. Unless you're a woman who feels like, okay, I need to have a career. But even the women who feel like they need to have careers, how often do you see a woman who gets married to a man and then she has a belief which is, okay, so when I'm married, I'm just going to start working part-time? Or she holds this possibility that the man will take her out of work and she'll just be able to live and do whatever the hell. You know what I mean? It does sound like maybe women don't really want to work on a core level. I don't know. I have a friend, or actually a former friend, but his wife didn't work when I knew him. I don't know what she does now, but when I knew him, his wife didn't work. And to be honest with you, I was slightly judgmental about it. I never said anything, but in my head I judged because I was thinking, oh, you're not working, you should be working, this, that, and the other. She said to me one day, and it's just in passing now, she lives for her children, and being with her children gives her the most joy out of anything. She doesn't want to be away from her children at all. And then that really made me think, because it's like, surely that's the most important thing in the world, right? Like your kids and your children. Then it made me think, all right, so why would I want my wife, my woman, to have to work so that we then have to find someone else to look after the kids, and who knows what kind of views that person is going to instill into the children? Maybe they'll abuse them, maybe not, etc. It's like, wouldn't it not be best to have the person looking after your children be someone that you really trust and know 100%? You know, I am starting to wonder if we got things backwards in society. I'm starting to wonder, like, I'm not saying women shouldn't work. I'm not saying that, but I am thinking, I don't know, maybe women shouldn't work.
Crazy.
Yeah. And then men gave women the right to vote.
That's right.
Think about that for a second. Now, that's a small study. We've given you numbers in the past where it's anywhere from 70 to 80-something% if you try and take the totality of data as far as women who were against the vote. She explains why that was the case. I've gotten into that, but you do need to know that top line number. The overwhelming majority of women did not want the vote because of what it came with, because they felt that they had influence, and because they didn't want women to be ruined through the process of politics. And they thought they would lose some influence and leverage. And here's something else. This transitions to, okay, so that's the case, but people will say it's a good thing that they have the vote. And feminism, right, has been a good thing overall. Choice. Who could be against choice? Well, Rachel got into that, and I think articulated this pretty well. Most women would choose to be stay-at-home moms, something that feminists proactively they denied the vote for the vote. They also wanted to prevent women from having the option to stay home. So women right now, if you say, well, I can't have it all, I have to make a choice, you can thank feminists who wanted to ensure that you couldn't stay home with your kids, but you'd outsource that.
You asked me, like, do women really want to be in the workplace, or are they only kind of really choosing the girl boss stuff?
That's a giant generalization anyway.
Right, of course it is.
Obviously, some women do and some women don't, and there's a lot of women who naturally, maternally want to have children and want to have a family.
Simone de Beauvoir.
Joe Rogan always sits on the fence. He always does that. It's like, oh, that's a massive generalization. Some women do, some women don't. He does that all the time. I like Joe, but I feel the need to say it.
Arguably the biggest feminist of second wave, the French intellectual who was buddies with Jean-Paul Sartre, and they got in trouble for grooming underage kids and seducing them and all kinds of crazy stuff. But she's respected as the greatest feminist intellectual of the 20th century, and she was super influential. And in a 1970s interview with Betty Friedan, she said, I don't believe that society should give women the opportunity or the choice to stay home and be mothers, because if we do, they're all going to pick that. and I don't think it should be an option. So
Oh my God.
it was the view of the feminists that, yeah, and Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton said that. They said, we would have never passed suffrage had it not been for men. If it was ever left up to women alone, we would have never passed suffrage. They would have never gone for it. They don't want liberation.
So, here's an interesting thing I have noticed, right? Now, I'm not going to say all feminists. I have no idea, but I see this online a lot where you get feminists who say, we are for women and for women's rights and for the rights of women to choose how to live their lives. But then when they see women living lives that don't fall in line with how they think women should live, as in being housewives or things like this, then they get annoyed and they get angry. It's like, no, what are you doing? No, what are you doing? And this whole idea that they could be like, we do not trust women to make the right decision, the right choice. So we have to remove the choice from them because we know what's best for them. That's kind of dark and gross and disgusting. Now look, here's the thing. Have I looked into any of this? No. Maybe she's lying. Maybe the sources that she cited in her book are lies. Maybe everything Stephen Crowder's saying is a lie. I don't think it is though. And like there's this, something she said about this woman actually, I think Margaret Sanger her name was, like this legendary feminist. Actually she was a eugenicist and she wanted people to not have children. She was very, very, very like pro that. And actually I think this is a woman who didn't like black people as well. She thought black people were like the lowest of the low. I might be butchering the name. I know that there's definitely a woman called Margaret Sanger and there's definitely some legendary feminists who I think started Planned Parenthood, right? Which is where people go for abortions. And it was started largely to encourage black people to abort their babies so the black population dwindled or just didn't grow. Like that definitely did happen. And there's a video of this woman, I think it's Margaret Sanger, again, you know, maybe I'm butchering the names. If I am, I apologize. But saying having a child is the worst thing that you can ever do. And it's an evil thing to bring a child into the world. It's like evil thing.
Well, I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically. Delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things just marked when they're born. That to me is the greatest sin that people can commit.
It's like, so you don't really believe in families then, do you? Clearly. And it makes sense that you would then try and start a worldview that, I mean, would in some way destabilize the nuclear family setup. But what the hell do I know?
And I really hope that if you're watching this, and I know we have plenty of women who watch, but I hope that you sit down and watch this with your wife or your significant other, if you're a man, because there are some truths that are really uncomfortable. And that's something we need to break through. If we have this conversation, go, you know, actually the 19th may have been a mistake in a lot of ways. People go, whoa, you must be a showman. Hold on. And actually, not just third wave feminism, all feminism may have been not just a mistake, but a very evilly influenced movement. And it's antithetical to all forms of true Christianity when you understand its roots. It's an uncomfortable conversation to have. It's kind of a third rail, but we gotta be honest about it. And that's why I think this conversation was incredibly valuable. And I do think that it's going to become a reference piece. Here's another one. Rachel talks about this. You've heard me discuss this. You've heard me cite those people, by the way, and change my mind. Simone de Beauvoir was sort of the godmother of modern gender theory, though it still existed within a binary before we got to John Money and all of these things. Rachel goes on to talk about how feminists like Margaret Sanger, who I've discussed, and Nazis, kind of one and the same, they were eugenicists. And they decided to make a part of that eugenics plan, not just abortion, we all talk about that, but birth control may be a blind spot for a lot of people.
This is exactly what I was saying. All right, so I got it right.
She was getting paid by the Rockefeller Foundation and promoted by people like H.G. Wells, who she was also having an affair with. They're all a bunch of creepers, Joe, I'm telling you. He was a eugenicist who loved the idea of millions of abortions a year.
H.G. Wells, the War of the Worlds guy, was a eugenicist.
Yep. Feminism was instrumental in that. That's actually where the birth control pill came from as well. Margaret Sanger, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Kaiser Wilhelm Foundation, and a lot of Nazi scientists are the ones who started synthesizing human hormones to make birth control pills. And the way they sold that was they said, look, we know abortion's very unpopular. People don't like it. It's a very terrible thing that we have to do. We have to do it because we don't want all these babies. Ugh. But, if you let us have the birth control pill and you make it like widely available and socially acceptable, abortion will be a thing of the past. Nobody will need one ever again. That's how it was marketed and sold to the world. And it sounds right. It sounds reasonable. Maybe it's better. Maybe it's better just to prevent all the pregnancies and then we don't have to worry about abortions. But here we are in 2026. You can get you can get birth control pills for $4 at Walmart. You can go down to your local health department in your county and get them for free if you're under a certain income status. And we still have, well, at least before they overturned Roe v. Wade, we still had about 1 million abortions a year in this country.
And that's super important, isn't it? We have, the roots of feminism. And she does get into the occult, by the way, and a lot of the spiritualism. And some of it isn't necessarily evil in the way that you would think. It's just degenerate. And it really was sort of people selling snake oil. They knew that they were scamming folks. She's very good at sort of outlining that in the book. So you have the roots of it. All right, it's antithetical to you as a Christian. You cannot be a Christian feminist. It's just not a thing. And then we look at the results. The results are bad. The results are worse. Everything that women have been promised was a lie. The results have been the opposite from feminism. And I want to be clear, this is not just third wave feminism. From its inception, and that was the goal. And that's because feminism is definitively, this is objectively true. It's a subset of Marxist ideology. That was part of the Marxist playbook, right? Divide and conquer. You're not going to have the numbers unless you break up the family and you have women becoming nagging harpies, to be clear.
So that is pretty interesting to me. It is. And it goes to show how we can be completely lied to about history. How history can be one way, like the actual truth can be one way, but then if you control like the newspapers, the media, the history books, the textbooks, you can brainwash people to believe in something else. The average woman thinks, oh, women have been held down for years. Like, how often do you see women online who will say something like, the reason why I am being a arsehole to men is that men have done this to women for centuries. And no, I'm not saying all women do this, of course, but the women who are like really anti-men, they'll say that, yeah? Men have done this to women for centuries. So now I'm just getting my get back. And it's like, even if that was actually true, the men who did that aren't alive today. This is something I think, right? When black people speak about slavery, because any white person who's watching this didn't take part in slavery. So to blame that person for slavery would be ridiculous. Now, are there some structural residue? Is there some structural residue left over from slavery that should be kind of dismantled a bit? Yeah, there is, right? And should the government dismantle that structural residue that's left over from slavery? Yes, they should. But should the average man on the street or woman bear the blame for that? No, I don't think they should. And also, I tend to think, I wouldn't say I believe in reincarnation, but I think it's very likely to be true. And something I'm kind of aware of is like, if reincarnation is true, maybe I was white in a past life. Actually, I did have a past life experience where I was a young white boy with blonde hair, but that's neither here nor there. But I've always thought, all right, reincarnation is actually true. Then you could have a black person complaining to a white person about slavery and what was done in slavery or racism in like the Martin Luther King era. But actually that black person was in a white body at that time and was perpetrating the racism, and actually the white person that they're complaining to was in a black body at the time. And it's like, if that is actually true, that just makes everything so freaking ridiculous. But I'm digressing. What am I trying to say? It's just like, you don't know the truth. Nobody knows the truth. Like, I haven't actually looked into this, what they're saying. Maybe they're lying. I mean, I don't think they are. I don't think they are. And I don't think that you'd be able to attack a narrative like this, which is feminism is a needed, good and just thing, which is basically the savior of women all across the Western world, you can't attack that without receipts. You'd need receipts. And it's like, you don't know what's true. What do you believe and what do you not? If you see what I mean. But anyway, if this has inspired you to have a look, have a look. I mean, again, Rachel Wilson's got a book which I might have to pick up and read. Something like The Occult History of Feminism. Something like that. It's like occult is in it and feminism is in it. And apparently it's a thoroughly researched thesis about where feminism really comes from. There we go. I mean, what I will say is this. You know, from like all of the dating stuff and whatnot, you know, pick up and whatever, manosphere talk, whatever. It does seem like what women respond to is more in line with the traditional view rather than what we're told women are supposed to respond to in the West. You know, in modern society, women want to be equal. No, they don't. Not in a relationship sense. No, they don't. They want a man who is superior, yet still treats them like they're equal. But even then, they don't really want to be treated like they're equal, because if you treat a woman like you're completely equal, she will not feel that charge and that spark. So really and truly, it's like they want a man that's a bit better than them, but who still treats them well, but is aware that he's better than them. But they don't really want an equal. They don't. Which is why they want a man who's taller. If he's taller, are you equal? If he's stronger, are you equal? If he's more confident, are you equal? If he makes more money, are you equal? You see what I mean? If I get up on a public forum and I say, women want a man who's superior, people go, how could you say that? You horrible man, how could you say that? That's what they'll say. But then it's like, look at everything I've just said. Well, okay, but you want a man who's taller, stronger. You want a man who's faster. You probably want a man who's more intelligent. You definitely want a man who's more confident. You want a man who makes more money. This looks like a superior being, doesn't it? And like, if you ever hear women speak about dating men that are on their level, they'll go, yeah, I might do that. I could date a man who's on my level. Like, to a woman, dating a man who's on her level is taking a step down. Now, here's the thing. People hear me say that and they think like I'm attacking women. I'm not. All I'm doing is just looking at human society the way you would look at ants in a colony. That's it. So imagine you're looking at ants, right? And you go, now we have the worker ant. And the worker ant works to get food for the colony. That is a scout. The scout discovers food. The scout alerts the rest of the colony. This is the queen. The queen is laying the eggs. I'm just looking at humans like that. That is it. Like it. So, yeah, it is very intriguing. Anyway, Mercy Buki, thank you for your time. This is the Man Manual. The Man Manual, hosted by who? By me, by moi, by Kieran. Thank you for your time, right? Thank you. I really appreciate you, because in no way, shape or form do you have to be here. Not even slightly, right? But you are here. You're here with me, and that is not lost on a brother. Now, if you like the cut of my jib, please like and comment and subscribe. Like, it helps a lot. It really does. You know, when you subscribe, right? You are well, when you perform any action, likes and comments, all of the above, you are telling YouTube that I am putting out good content, and therefore encouraging YouTube to push it out to more people. And to be honest with you, when I see that subscriber count increase, it makes me feel good. It really does. So please do that. Because here's the thing as well. Apparently, only 5% of the people who watch my videos are subscribed. Literally 5%. So 95% of you people, and I know, like, you're like, whoa, like, Kieran makes good videos. He's intelligent. I like the way he thinks. I like the way Kieran thinks. Cool. But, like, don't just do that from a distance. Subscribe, please. It helps. And also, as well, go to the description. Join my Substack. I got tons of free resources, articles, things like that could help you. I've got a course called the AI Seduction Protocol. I've got a fiction book called N-Word. 85-year-old white woman dies and is reborn in the body of a 23-year-old black OnlyFans model. And yeah, there we go. There we are. Merci beaucoup and ciao.